So that's Dr. Miguna, a friend of ours and a friend of the show, Kenyan in exile from Canada. Also, Professor Nasongo.
Hi viewers, this is Professor Wanjala Nasongo, Professor of International Relations and Comparative Politics at Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee. Nice to be with you this evening, this afternoon.
Oh, thank you, gentlemen. Nice to have you and myself here, Dr. Jeremiah Okadi from our studios headquarters here in Minneapolis, and also delighted to have also John Maina joining us live from Nairobi. John, we're just starting the program. If you could please introduce yourself to our diaspora audience.
Good evening. If you're in Africa, if you're in Europe, good morning. If you're in America, good morning. I'm sorry, we were on the road, so I had to look for a station to stop and log in. I'm sorry, I'm not in my station, so you can understand it's a silly season. We are on a campaign trail, but I said I have to jump on board. And I'm glad to see my old colleague, Miguna, friend and colleague. And let me say thank you so much for having me here.
So good to have you, gentlemen, and again for our viewers, if you have any questions and you want to be involved in this discussion, please feel free to go to our Facebook page and feel free to make your comment. And if you have any question, please do so as well on our Facebook page or YouTube. We'll be able to bring in a few questions later in the show. But in the meantime, also a quick reminder that it's all about politics, and as I said in our earlier program, politics is emotive. So you expect sometimes the emotions to be high, low, middle, and that's an expectation of politics, as John Minas just told us a moment ago, is doing that in the campaign trail. So as we exchange ideas, we're hoping that we're going to help inform Kenyans so that they make a better decision as we head to elections in Kenya. So gentlemen, maybe to begin off, let's begin from the ground. John Maina, if you don't mind, very quickly, what's going on in the ground and what are Kenyans missing, especially the Kenyans in the diaspora?
Well, I know Kenyans, can you hear me clearly?
Yes, yes.
Okay, well, good. Kenyans in the diaspora, actually, we're looking forward to participate in the oncoming in the 2020 general elections in Kenya. But unfortunately, IEBC was not able to register all the diasporans who were willing to vote. The diaspora voters, I think, who registered were less than 5,000, I think.
Okay.
Worldwide. And that's because the requirement was that you go to an embassy, about 12 embassies in the world, to register there as a voter. And some of those embassies, it was a challenge for them to get there.
Okay.
I know Miguna can tell you that because Miguna is in Canada.
Okay.
I think Canada, they had 3 polling stations, registering stations.
So quickly, John, so what is the political environment in Kenya overall? So okay, quickly in a sentence, what's yes?
Well, as Obama used to say, we're in the silly season.
Okay.
It's quite a silly season right now. Everything goes.
Okay, oh good. At least we'll have enough time to talk about all that. So I'm going to bring in, if you don't mind, Dr. Miguna, just like any Kenyan living in the diaspora, and for you in particular, talking about you being in exile, what has been your assessment, a very brief assessment of the political environment in Kenya?
Toxic, extremely toxic, extremely disappointing. Political space has contracted, not expanded. Democratic rights have been mainly compromised. The Constitution promised a robust Bill of Rights, and the Kenyans have not realized that. So even though you find that different political outfits are excited about the election, the reality is that more than 10 years after the ratification of the new constitution, Kenyans are worse off economically, worse off in terms of their rights being respected. So we are going into this election, a very divided country with a toxic environment, a bad concoction. We hope things will turn out okay, but I don't have a very good impression of what is going to happen.
Okay, thank you for that quick intro. Again, we're talking about politics 64 years into independence. Professor Nasongo, maybe your views first. Just, I'm sure every Kenyan across the world have their opinions, the negative, the toxic, whatever it is. But you in particular, what's your assessment of the political environment in Kenya as well?
Well, the political environment, I think a lot of achievement has been made since the beginning of the process of democratization. If I remember when I was an undergraduate at the University of Nairobi, just the mention of authoritarianism alone would get you into detention. Now people can stand up and insult the president without any consequences. So we have come a long way. With the promulgation of the Constitution of 2010, the process of consolidating democracy is actually happening. And I really like the manner in which our judiciary is acting, that it has exerted its independence from the executive in ways that would never have been envisaged during the days of the single party rule. So there are positive developments. But in the immediate environment now, with the electioneering going on, the fallout between the president and his deputy, I think, is of concern in terms of his support for Raila and what that may mean for the outcome of the elections. The commitment of the president to ensure that his deputy does not succeed him, one wants to ask whether everything will be done to ensure that Ruto does not succeed the president. And if that is what is going to happen, then the fear is that at the end of the day, the results of these elections might generate a lot of anxiety and perhaps violence and so on. And so that is my main concern. Otherwise, so far, the process of democratization has yielded quite positive results.
Okay, very interesting perspective, of course, through your view. And understand, obviously, as I said earlier on, politics is emotive, and a lack of political will, particularly those ones in authority, might cause problems in the country. But again, let's look at the political development in the country right from independence to where we are. And in particular, when I pay particular focus on the handshake. I think that's interesting. I grew up knowing that there was a political parties in the country, but then again, now we have the handshake, and quite a number of Kenyans, quite frankly, have no good understanding of what that handshake means and what the implications of the political formations are in the country and in the near future. Beginning with you, John Maina, you're on the ground. What do you think is the implication of the handshake? What does it even mean to begin with, and what is the implication of that?
Well, actually, it depends on which camp you subscribe to. Of course, if you subscribe to Azimio, they'll tell you the handshake is something that is very progressive in our current politics. If you subscribe to the opponents, they'll tell you that's the worst thing that has ever happened to our country. So it depends on which group you subscribe to. Otherwise, in my own general opinion, I think the handshake was something good for the country. You can remember we used to have very chaotic post-elections chaos, and I think now we're trying to find a way on how to maneuver this huge task. Which has been quite a challenge to the Kenyan elections for the last, since I think 2002. I think the last election that was peaceful in Kenya was in 2002 when Kibaki was elected. Most of you can remember Kibaki Tosha. After that, we've always had post-election violence. So I think it was something important to sit down with your opponents and decide on the way forward. And the way forward was to shake hands, apologize to each other, and try to bring sense into the Kenyan elections.
Okay, good. It sounds to me you're describing that Dr. Miguna mentioned there moments ago. It's pretty much a toxic environment, and what you're saying here as I hear from a distance it's an uncertain times. We are not particularly sure of where we're heading this with. To you, Dr. Miguna, your assessment from a distance, what does the handshake really mean, and what is the implication on the Kenyan political parties?
Dr. Curry, the handshake is the most unfortunate event that happened in Kenya since 1966. Elections are not for leaders. Elections are for the people of Kenya and for people generally. Elections is not some kind of good that belong to the leaders or the so-called political actors. Elections should afford Kenyans an opportunity to express themselves in terms of how they want to be governed and who should be governing them, so that they can legitimately, freely, and democratically choose who their leaders are. Now, violence, particularly post-election violence, is not brought about by elections. In Kenya, post-election violence has been, over years, brought about by electoral fraud. If elections are not democratic, they are not free and fair, and they do not reflect the people's will, then the people will resist the outcome which is not legitimate or which does not reflect their wishes. And this is what happened in 1992. This is what happened in 2007. And this is what happened in 2017. To resolve that problem or to sort out that problem, 2 or 3 or 4 so-called leaders cannot just purport to meet and shake hands and wish what had happened and what caused the problem away. What would have been expected is that we should have addressed the issue of electoral fraud, or who are responsible, and how do we ensure that no more electoral fraud happens in Kenya so that people don't fight over power as a result of the contest, which is not seen to be fair? That should have been the issue. But here we have a situation where 2 people purported to be meeting and forgiving each other and hoping that that will make Kenyans not fight in the subsequent elections. That will not happen, because if the 2022 elections are stolen or are rigged, or Kenyans believe that the outcome does not reflect their will, then there will be a fight, because those who lose illegitimately, those who believe that the elections have been stolen, will resist the electoral rigging. So the handshake was a cynical ploy by Uhuru Kenyatta primarily, and secondarily Raila Odinga, to pull wool over Kenyans' eyes and to pretend that everything is okay, when in fact nothing is okay. Those who died after the 2017 elections, we've not had justice for them. The ID servers have not been opened. Nothing has happened in terms of doing a prognosis as to what went wrong in 2017. So I am saying that sitting on a bomb and hoping that it does not go off is not a panacea for peace. And we are sitting on a time bomb.
Okay. So good, thank you, Dr. Miguna. Professor Nasongo, Dr. Miguna is making some good points, trying to give a rational view of what is happening in Kenya and giving a fairly historical perspective. Needless to say, if you go back to the times of independence, talking about the late Mzee Jomo Kenyatta and the late Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, we had that argument about the Serikali ya Majimbo, federal government, and then there was talk about the unitary government. That was Odinga the father and Uhuru Kenyatta the father. And here we are, years later, almost 60 years later, we have the son and the son talking about handshake, and what I've not had so far, quite frankly, and I agree with Dr. Miguna, we have not had about issue-based politics. There's the handshake, but we have not had issues specifically addressing the Kenyans. Your view on the handshake and its implications on Kenyan politics?
A number of points. Number one, the handshake was essentially, in my perspective, an elite pact between the president and Raila Odinga. The purpose of the handshake was to serve the elite interests. See, it has nothing to do with the interests of Kenyans and so on and so forth. Of course, the justification is that we want to bring the country together and ensure that there is no violence. But in bringing together Uhuru, the president, and Raila and his political party and members of parliament, they then marginalized Ruto. You see, and it seemed as if that pact was essentially meant to marginalize Ruto. So how do you argue that you want to bring together the country when you are marginalizing another one? So you absorb the official position, but then you create an opposition within government in itself. You see. Two, and here I agree with Attorney Miguna on the point that essentially it was a cynical move. For me, I don't call it cynical. I call it a strategic move on the part of Raila Odinga. Raila Odinga won the elections of 2007. It was stolen away from him in a very brazen way. I don't believe that the elections of 2013 were won in the first round. Those elections, in my view, should have gone to the second round. And so there have been shenanigans that have been going on within the context of electoral results in Kenya. And Raila is now at an advanced age. This might be his last chance at the presidency. And in my view, he has made a strategic calculation that the only way to secure his electoral victory is to align with the incumbent, because the incumbent is the one that has been stealing victories from him, you see. So that's a very strategic move on his part. Whether it comes to pass that he will succeed or not, of course, is something else. Finally, on the point about independence and Odinga and the Jomo Kenyatta, it is true, in fact, that Jaramogi Oginga Odinga was the first to rehabilitate Jomo Kenyatta. While Jomo Kenyatta was still imprisoned, KANU won self-government elections. Jaramogi was called upon to form government. He said he was not going to form government with Jomo in prison, you see. Yet when Jomo came back from prison, he became president, made Odinga vice president, but then they disagreed heavily on issues of policy. Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, Bildad Kagia, and their friends argued the case for deconstructing the colonial state in order to make the system work for the common person. Jomo Kenyatta and his friends, on the other hand, were keen on maintaining the institutions of the colonial state for their own selfish interest. Now you can see Jomo Kenyatta is facilitated to assume power by Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. Then they fall out. Odinga is even put under house arrest in 1969 when his KPU is banned. Fast forward, Uhuru, the son to the later president, runs for president in 2013 with Ruto. You see, they both are indicted at the ICC. Then they run for elections to secure their freedom and so on. But again, they fall out with one another. So it is like history repeating itself in a way.
So 2022.
Which is a very interesting dynamic. Yes.
So John, I want to come back to you here. You hear two interesting perspectives from Brother Miguna and Brother Nasongo. So pretty much we're talking about giving an historical analysis that is really focused on individuals. The late Kenyatta, the late Odinga, and then the sons are here, and then we brought in Ruto. Are Kenyans being taken for a ride here? When are the leadership within this political party is going to talk about the issues that affect the ordinary Kenyan?
Thank you, Dr. Kari, for that question. But first of all, let me start by disagreeing with both of them. Let me start with Dr. Miguna. He clearly articulated why there shouldn't have been a handshake. A handshake was because of the grievances of the elections, especially of 2017, where Raila Amolo Odinga thought he won, and the other camp also thought they won. So that's why there was a dispute in 2017. And so Honorable Raila started a boycott after the elections were nullified. He started a boycott. Most of you can remember boycott for, I think, Nation newspaper, Safaricom, a milk company. And I can tell you that, I don't know if Miguna is forgetting, Miguna joined Raila Amolo Odinga at Koinange Street, boycotting Safaricom, and getting a SIM card. Miguna can remember that, getting a SIM card at a rival company, phone company on Koinange Street. I think Miguna can remember that. Meaning Miguna was supporting Raila in his displeasure to be rigged in that election. And also, let me also answer Professor Wanjala. I think Professor Wanjala said that the handshake was to sideline one of the candidates, which is William Ruto. I disagree with that, because remember, during the handshake, we didn't have presidential candidates declared. Remember, at that time, even Raila Amolo Odinga had not declared he's going to run for elections. Okay, so we can't say it was. By the way, even William Ruto, who knew he was going to run for president during the handshake, so it was not premeditated to sideline William Samoei Ruto.
So I still John.
Allow me to rejoin, yes, because he has tried to counter what we put in place, and here I will side with Miguna in terms of the cynical nature of the handshake. You see, so if there were grievances after the elections of 2017, the grievances had to do with electoral management and the declaration of electoral results, which was fruitless. When you are now entering that handshake, you should then focus on addressing the reasons why the handshake is necessitated in the first place. But nothing of that nature was done. So you just enter a handshake, you agree, the two of you, and move on when the institutional basis of the disagreement remains in place. Do you see? So much so that when Uhuru says, the president says that the handshake was to bring people together, right? But which people? You are bringing in the ODM brigade into government that is supposed to be in the opposition, and in doing so, marginalizing the deputy president and his supporters, MPs in parliament, in a way that then creates an opposition within government. Do you see? That is what I'm talking about.
Okay, so good gentlemen. Gentlemen, okay, let me bring gentlemen. Okay, just hold brief. Okay, John, I'll get you. I'll get you in a moment. I'll get to you in a moment, John. I'm going to bring in Miguna here. Miguna makes some good point. I see my question has not been answered clearly here. We are talking about personalities, and that moves me to the next question, if Miguna, if you don't mind building on that, and then we'll bring in John. What we are talking about here is the isms. We're talking about Kenyatta isms. Kenyatta, who is Kenyatta, his son and his followers. And then we're talking about Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, his son and his followers. And then we're talking about probably Moi, and I think I've seen Gideon Moi aligning to Azimio coalition. So we are continuing that isms of personalities in Kenyan politics. And then we are now talking about Ruto, and then probably in the future we'll be talking about Ruto and the isms. And then what we are seeing, these movements around political parties is about who is who in Kenyan politics moving around. But to Dr. Miguna's point, we have not got to a point where we are talking about issues affecting the common person. Dr. Miguna, to you then, how do we end these isms of personalities in Kenya so that we can move forward and focus on the needs of the common person?
Yes, Dr. Kari, if you allow me, I would like to quickly just go over some of the things that my co-panelists have addressed, and then tie it up with your question. So let's start with the issue of whether or not Raila's move was strategic. So the word strategy, to take off from Professor Nasongo's point, would be if Raila Odinga did the handshake to achieve a long-term gain. But long-term gain for who, positive? Number one, was the handshake to achieve the long-term gain of Kenyans the majority of Kenyans that have fought for democracy, that have fought for the upholding of human rights, that have fought for self-governance. No, it wasn't. Because if it was, then we would have seen institutional and structural changes between 2018 when the handshake happened and now. But the only thing they were addressing in terms of structure was to change the constitution. Kenyans did not fight after 2017 election because of the constitution. It was not because the constitution is defective, therefore they fought. Raila knows that. Kenyans fought because of the perception, real or imagined, but mainly real, that the results did not reflect the actual voting by the majority of Kenyans. Now, if you say, as my friend John says, Raila Odinga's election was rigged, which I believe, it was not just against Raila Odinga. Raila Odinga was not the only candidate running for elections in 2017. We were running from MCAs to the president, and there were different parties. So when you disenfranchise the people, you are not just disenfranchising the supporters of one candidate, Raila Odinga. Now, John mistakenly believed that when I joined or helped form the National Resistance Movement and unveiled a number of boycotts, economic boycotts of products of companies that were supporting electoral fraud, that I was supporting Raila Odinga. No, I wasn't. I was supporting the fight for electoral justice. I was supporting the resistance against electoral fraud. I was supporting the move to, for once, make sure that the will of the Kenyan people prevailed. Now, did marginalization get dealt with or addressed in the handshake? No. Did electoral justice get addressed in the handshake and after that? No. Did the issue of human rights, for example, the assassination of Chris Musando and all the other innocent victims of repression, did they get justice? No. Did any of their killers get arrested and prosecuted? No. Therefore, to Professor Nasongo's point, Raila did this to get power for himself. But let me deal with that issue. If the issue was electoral fraud, the fact that Raila popularly won the election and the person who lost took power, how are you going to get power by relying on the same person who rigged you out? In other words, is Raila Odinga now saying rigging is good? That the person who rigged him out in 2017 and 2013 would now help him rig elections the same way he was rigged out, and therefore that is justified? My answer is no, it isn't justified. What we are looking for, and what the majority of Kenyans are looking for, is to transform the electoral infrastructure so that the will of the people prevails. So that at the end of the day, on August 9th this year, whether Ruto wins or Raila wins or either of them lose, the results must reflect the will of the Kenyan people. So I'm not sure if I've addressed your question, but for me, that is where the discussion is. The discussion ought not to be about Ruto the person, about Raila the person. It should be the will and the interest of the majority of Kenyans vis-a-vis the electoral process.
Okay. So
that's what the majority.
Maina, and then I'll get you, Professor Nasongo, in a moment. Maina, you are to respond to that one. You're already on the campaign trail. To the points raised by Professor Nasongo and Dr. Miguna here. So is the campaign trail about personalities, or is it about the ordinary Kenyan? If so, what are you doing? I know for the sake of our viewers, you're leaning towards the Azimio persuasion. Are you really focused on the individual Kenyan, or is it those at the top?
First of all, let me make it clear that I'm here as a director, executive director for Center for Diaspora Affairs.
Good.
Okay, so I'm here to discuss the perspective of Kenyan elections in lieu of the diaspora. So that's why I'm here today. I'm not here to defend one political persuasion versus another. My being here is to share my perspective on the Kenyan election as it relates to the Kenya diaspora, and I was prepared for that.
Good. Okay, so then Nasongo, you had a point, and then we'll get back to him on this the next question. Nasongo, you had a point.
Yes. Yeah.
I want to ask.
No, let me finish. Let me finish.
Nasongo.
Anthony Miguna, then you can come in. Two quick points. Number one, about the end of personality politics in the country, what Dr. Okari is calling personality isms, the Moi-ism, the Kenyatta-ism, and so on. I don't think it's going to end anytime soon. Why? Because of the ethnic basis of our politics. Ethnicity in Kenya has been politicized, and politics has been ethnicized in such a way that this has become entrenched. And people tend to vote, especially at the presidential level, not on the basis of the programs that particular individuals articulate, but on the basis of where they come from, you see. So that is highly problematic. Until we reach a point where we institutionalize politics, we are likely to see this kind of politics going on for a long time. Look at NASA as a political formation. It is no longer. CORD, the Coalition for Electoral Reform, it is no more. Political parties just come and go because they are tied to individuals. Number two, and this is the point that Tony Miguna raised about the handshake being strategic or not, and in his view, it can only be strategic if it is serving the long-term interests of the country in general. You see, politics is an iterated game. You see, it's a game of iteration. It's played in multiple arenas. And politicians are rational actors. They seek to maximize their chances of gaining political power, minimize the cost to themselves. And Raila has run for president for many times. I think this is the 5th time he is running. The election of 2007, like I mentioned, was obviously won by him, but he lost. The elections of 2013 should have gone to a second round, and maybe he could have won, maybe not. The 2017 elections, as Maina pointed out, generated a lot of disaffection because of the manner in which it was conducted. At the end of the day, President Uhuru won the presidency, but it was an illegitimate election. The mandate was tainted. How many people turned up in the second round of that vote? Less than 30% or thereabouts. So his legitimacy was tainted. And I think that is the basis upon which he entered into this handshake with Raila, knowing pretty well that actually Raila might have been the one who won the election. And without him, he was not going to go anywhere, given the polarization in the country as a result of the stealing of those elections. Okay. Now, that is strategic. On the part of Raila, it is very rational, because he is seeking at least to get into the presidency. We can disagree, and I agree with Miguna, that what is most important, what is most ideal, is to institutionalize politics, is to ensure that whoever wins is the one who is declared the winner, and this is what we want to achieve at the end of the day. But the reality is elections are stolen. And on the part of Raila, the best way to win this time around
Professor
is to win with those who steal.
Good enough. Good enough, Wanjala.
Level, it's rational. At the collective level, it may not be.
Okay, good enough, Wanjala. I'm going to bring you on to respond to diaspora questions in a moment. Miguna, I know you're responding.
Can I respond?
Okay, sure.
Real quick,
very quickly, and then I'm going to...
First of all, let's remember, we keep on forgetting the purpose of the handshake was to come... Have we lost somebody? Okay. The purpose of the handshake was to come together and bring peace into the nation, into a very chaotic post-election. Okay? And the two principals who were contesting in that election sat down and came up with a 9-point agenda that was infused into the BBI. Okay, this was to come up with resolutions of future elections, not to give yourself seats. Okay, I mean, read the BBI report clearly. You'll find that it was to address those issues, the people who are aggrieved, the people, the families of people who lost lives. Okay, the nine-point agenda in BBI was to resolve all those issues. And remember, BBI passed in all the counties, almost all the 47 counties in the country, meaning people are supporting BBI. It just lost in the court session, okay? But I think 27 out of, actually 42 counties voted for BBI.
Yeah.
It's only, I think, two counties that didn't vote for BBI, meaning the entire nation, majority of the entire of the Kenyans are supported BBI because it had resolutions that were addressing post-election violence.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it wasn't given the space to be voted through.
Okay, that will be a discussion later. Thank you, Maina. Dr. Miguna, question for you again as you respond to the same question, and that will move us to another segment. So the question then, we're still talking about individuals here. We're talking about the isms of Ruto, Moi, Kenyatta, and the likes. So then the question to you again, Dr. Miguna, are these political parties in Kenya authentic? Because what Kenyans in the diaspora are asking, yes, we hear you talk about it in personalities, but on what platform are they standing? If you are here in the US, you know, if you're in the Democratic Party, this is what the Democratic stands for. If you're in the Republican Party, you know what it is. If you're in England, you know the Conservatives or the Labour Party stands for this. But at the moment, the common person in Kenya, and particularly the Kenyans in the diaspora, have no understanding of what this political formation stands for. Mr. Miguna, if you could respond to that as well.
I'm going to respond to that, Dr. Perry. Thank you very much. I wanted to ask Maina, the Center for Diaspora Affairs, what is that? Is it a government outfit? And who appointed you, the executive director of that outfit? And were you interviewed? Was there competitive, hiring process? Because it's unfortunate that Maina, who has lived in the United States for a very long time, goes back to Kenya and buys into all manner of retrogressive practices that he should have gotten rid of from his bloodstream. It seems like he got some kind of China cure and comes here to peddle the propaganda of the outfit that he works for. And that is very unfortunate. So I want to deal with that because I need Maina to come out openly and tell us who he works for.
Yeah, we'll give him time to respond to that, Dr. Miguna. Move on.
No. Let me respond.
You'll get time. Maina, you'll get that.
I have to finish what I'm saying,
sure.
Maina. Number two, I want to deal with Professor Nasongo's statement that politics in Kenya is ethnicized. I disagree with that completely. If that was the case, I would be supporting Raila Odinga. We are both Luos. I don't support Raila Odinga. And if you look at the current political happenings in Kenya today, the entire Mount Kenya region, almost 90% of it, is supporting Ruto. Ruto is not a Kikuyu. In 2002, Luos supported Kibaki to a person. They were not supporting Raila Odinga. They were opposing Moi and what Moi represented. In fact, it is a very bad gloss over by intellectuals such as Professor Nasongo to pigeonhole Kenyans into this ethnic box without looking at the complexities of Kenyan politics. It is the current Kenyan press and the political elite that keep on harping on this ethnic problem, when in fact the majority of the people on the ground are not practicing ethnic politics. If they were, Raila Odinga would not have won the 2007 election and the 2017 election because they would not have supported him on the basis of ethnicity. So we should be able to deconstruct the propaganda that Kenyans only vote for people coming from their community. Number three, I don't want to elevate treachery, which is what Raila Odinga practiced in 2018 through the handshake, to be a strategic move. You see, the moment you elevate betrayal to the level of strategy, you are giving it oxygen. What Raila Odinga did was such a cynical, treacherous act that should be condemned and should not be seen as a positive attribute for any political leader. Because instead of focusing on the overall long-term interest of his supporters, of his political party, of the so-called ideological endgame for his for the section of Kenyans that he represented, he now recoiled into selfish or personal interest as the basis for having a deal with Uhuru Kenyatta, with the majority of his people not benefiting anything from this arrangement except himself. Now, to come back to your question about personal, whether or not Kenyan political parties are real institutions or they are just instruments for achieving personal interest. That's an interesting question. Number one, all political parties all over the world must address personal and collective interest. So there is no political party all over the world that is only addressing the interest of the population at large without addressing the individual interest of politicians. Otherwise, politicians would not have ambition. When Obama joined the Democratic Party and ran for president, he was also running for himself. He wanted to become president. But he also wanted to aspire to achieving the interest of the collective, the members of the Democratic Party. In Kenya and most African countries, unfortunately, the personal interest is the dominant interest. And the public interest is only there to be used as a vehicle to take the person to power. And once the person takes power, then it's a big man. I'm now big. I'm now the overall chief, like Uhuru Kenyatta is behaving currently. Uhuru Kenyatta forgot that Ruto and his teams help him get to power more than even himself. Because as a person, Uhuru Kenyatta, and I know these people personally, Uhuru Kenyatta is a very indisciplined man. Uhuru Kenyatta sleeps up to 2 o'clock. Uhuru Kenyatta drinks beyond 10 o'clock. Uhuru Kenyatta as a person cannot campaign. So as a person, Uhuru Kenyatta is useless. Without the Kenyatta family money, without the ethnic jingoistic interest, and without the foreign support, Uhuru Kenyatta is just a shell. But they forget that it is the John Mainas, and I give this as a representative name, not necessarily John Maina, the participant today, and the Njoroges and the Kamaus and the Nasongos and everybody else that propel them to power, and they must take care of the interests of these people.
Okay, John, I'm going to bring you, I think you have a chance to as you respond to that question, Maina, as you respond to that question, on top, because you're working for the Center of Diaspora Affairs, that additional question to you then, what should the diasporans do to ensure that we end the politics of isms in Kenya, the politics of tribalism, so that we can focus really on the issues that affect the ordinary Kenyan?
Okay, should I answer that first, or should I respond to
respond first and then answer that one.
Okay, let me respond to Miguna. First of all, Miguna and I, we come a long way. We were both in the diaspora, and we were both members of KCA, Kenya Community Abroad. At that time, the only diaspora organization of Kenyans. So Miguna and I are friends, and we come a long way. And then both of us moved back to Kenya to work in the Prime Minister's office. Okay? So Miguna was my colleague at the Prime Minister's office. I'm just wondering if Raila has really changed since that time when both of us worked for him, because to me, Raila hasn't changed. His agenda is still the same for this country, fighting for the rights of this country. That one hasn't changed. So I'm wondering, when did Miguna realize that Raila Amolo Odinga has turned around, has made a U-turn on issues of human rights, issues of democracy, and etc. Secondly, let me now respond to his question on Center for Diaspora Affairs. And I'm glad he asked me that question. It's very important so that diaspora can know about this organization, the roots of it, and what it has been doing. Center for Diaspora Affairs was registered in 2015 here in Kenya as an NGO. I registered it as an NGO. It's a policy center, just like any other policy centers out there, just like the Kenya Human Rights and other organizations in the country. Center for Diaspora is the only diaspora policy center registered legally as an NGO in Kenya. And that one you can do your search and find out. Now, nobody appointed me to Center for Diaspora. I'm the one who registered it. I'm the one who founded it. So, of course, I'm the executive director by the fact that I'm the one, we are 3 signatories to Center for Diaspora Affairs. It's not an it's not a corporation. It's not corporate.
Right.
It's an NGO.
Okay.
And we don't have elections. I don't have to be elected to be executive director of something I founded. Okay? So Center for Diaspora Affairs is a policy center that has been working on diaspora issues, including a continuation of what Miguna and I did when we were members of Kenya Committee Abroad, which is to propose dual citizenship and voting rights, which I went to Bomas of Kenya in 2004 to propose it in the constitutional review of 2004. So this is Center for Diaspora now is a continuation of those efforts that will assist the diaspora in that legislation of dual citizenship and voting rights.
Okay.
Now, as we are talking, we have just got a response from IEBC. Center for Diaspora requested IEBC, first and foremost, to accept electronic registration and voting for diaspora. Okay, because as you can see, the diaspora are disfranchised because, for example, if you live in Alaska and the polling station is in, the nearest polling station is in Los Angeles, where we have a Kenyan consulate, that would take you so many hours to fly and register and vote in Los Angeles.
Okay.
Meaning,
okay,
the
yeah.
Constitution is very clear. Let me finish 1 second.
Okay, please.
The Constitution is very clear. The Constitution says elections are supposed to be free and fair. Okay? Meaning, free, you don't have to pay any money to fly many miles to go and register or vote. Okay? And that's why here in Kenya, a polling station is always next to a high school or a primary school next to your house. So you actually technically just walk there. Okay? So elections are supposed to be free and fair. Fair in the sense that you don't have to leave your work. Like, for example, now if you live in Alaska.
Yeah, if we can move faster to the second question, John, because we're running out of time.
No. Yeah, I just want to make that clear, what Center for Diaspora is doing, because that's what Miguna wanted to know. Now, I hope he understands that it's a continuation of what we started in KCA, but now, since KCA is no longer vibrant, we decided to establish a policy center in the country so that we can deal with issues of the diaspora.
Okay. Okay, and then there's Dr. Miguna and Wanjara. You take note of the question that just came on the screen, and you'll have a chance to respond to the same question, please. Go ahead, Professor Wanjara.
Thank you very much, Dr. Okari. 3 or so points I want to make. Mr. Maina earlier mentioned the idea that the BBI and the coming together of Raila and Uhuru was for purposes of peace. Why should they be coming together for purposes of peace? Where is the threat to peace coming from? It is coming from mismanaged elections, you see. So the point to do is to ensure justice and equity in the conduct of public affairs. Then peace will follow automatically. This idea, for example, of preaching peace now in the run-up to elections, that is a mirage. Peace is automatic as long as justice is done. We need justice, we need fairness, we need free and fair elections. There will be no violence at all. Number 2, the idea that BBI passed in 47 counties. Who knew what BBI was all about?
I didn't say 47.
Yeah, you mentioned the idea that BBI was passed, it was supported by the majority of Kenyans. Do they even know what BBI was about?
No, it's okay. It's not part of the conversation for now. Wanjala, keep on.
Let me finish, all right?
Wanjala.
Majority of the counties voted without even reading the draft. In Tharaka Nithi, a vote was passed before the copies of the BBI report were delivered. So these guys were just voting for the sake of voting without understanding what they were voting. Here is my point.
That's democracy. That's democracy.
BBI.
It's okay, Maina. Hold, Wanjala, your time.
In terms of, I have not been interfering with anyone. And everyone, I give them a chance to say whatever they. Can I be allowed to say what I have to say, please?
Yeah.
The purpose of the BBI was not the niceties that were put in there. The purpose of BBI was to change the constitution. Hardly 2 decades after it was promulgated. And it was to take care of elite interests. They wanted to create more executive positions to share. I am sure President Uhuru does not want to retire, and he wants to return as Prime Minister. That was why the BBI was all about. The idea of more money to the counties and so on, those were just sweeteners. Those things can be done administratively. They can be done policy-wise. They can be done legislatively. You do not need a constitutional amendment to execute that. Finally, the political formations and what they stand for, we don't have political parties in their proper sense to the extent of being institutionalized formations that can survive individualism. Dr. Miguna has mentioned the Democratic Party in the US, the Republican Party, and so on. Those are institutionalized. Politicians come and go. Those institutions remain in place. In our case, political parties are formed on a whim. After one election, they are gone. You see, look at a politician like Wamalwa, the current minister. In the last elections, he was in Ford something. Now he has formed another one. Look at Ruto. He had URP. Now it is UDA. Next cycle, you don't know where it will be. And that is why there is no ideological basis. There is no policy agenda. There is nothing in those political parties. They are personal fiefdoms. Once the politician leaves, the party collapses. And that is where we have a problem. And I think that we will be discussing this. I will have another point to make. And then finally, Miguna says, of course, Raila won 2007. He was voted for by everyone across the country. So ethnicity is not a factor. I wish that were the case, Dr. Miguna. I wish that were the case. That's an ideal we aspire to. But as it is now, our politics is actually organized on the basis of ethnicity. Look at the alliances being formed, right? You bring your people, I bring my people, we take power, we then share the spoils. That is all that is going on. So Deputy President Ruto wants, Mudavadi, you join us, come with the Luya people, with Maragolis. Wetangula join us, come with the Bukusus. You see, he is supposed to nominate a running mate from among the Kikuyu, so that on the basis of that, then the Kikuyu will vote for him. So we aspire for issue-based politics, but we are far from achieving that. And our major problem is our political leaders, that they mobilize people, they mobilize support, on the basis of this ethnic belonging rather than on the basis of whatever policy agendas they might have. Right now, if you ask anyone, what is the political program of Azimio? Nobody knows. If you ask even themselves, what is the political agenda of UDA, One Kenya Alliance? There is nothing. So it is just personality politics, ethnic mobilization, and that is it. And that is a very unfortunate thing.
Lastly, for you again, you want to respond to this, Dr. Miguna? You have that question there for you and Wanjala.
I agree with almost everything Professor Nasongo said, except for the last part. But most of the things that he said, I agree with. Let me deal with what my friend Maina said. Number one, Maina unfortunately says that we were both working for the office of the Prime Minister, but he conflates that. He's saying we were working for Raila. I was not working for Raila, I was working for the office of the Prime Minister, which is a public office, not a private office. I was not working for Raila personally. I was appointed by the President of the Republic of Kenya, who was Mwai Kibaki, as the senior advisor to the Prime Minister of the Republic of Kenya, who happened to be Raila Odinga. Raila Odinga does not own public offices, and he did not own that office. That office belonged to the people of Kenya, and I was earning money courtesy of the people of Kenya. Number two, I don't recall meeting Maina in any meeting or any situation. In fact, I don't know where Maina's office was. Even though he purports to have been working for the office of the Prime Minister, I don't recall Kenyans knowing anything Maina did. He may have been getting paid, but I don't know what he did up to today. Number three, Maina asked, when did Raila change? I think among Kenyans currently, I have done quite a bit of work on how Raila changed, when Raila changed, and why I disagreed with it. I have written a 600 plus pages of demonstrating that point, and everybody knows Raila betrayed Kenyans on every issue that he purportedly had stood for. On the issue of electoral justice, on the issue of human rights, on the issue of constitutionalism, on the issue of the rule of law, on the issue of democracy at every level, and I've been able to demonstrate that. Today is not the platform for that because I've done that job already. Number three, Maina says the Center for Diaspora Affairs is an NGO form. If it is just an NGO form and he believes that that makes it a policy institute, I have no comment. It is private NGO. We can do with it probably the way that Makau Mutua does with his NGOs and any other person. After all, they work together. Let me go to the point, 2 points that, one point Professor Nasongo made, and then the question that is on the board.
Okay.
Professor Nasongo said that he doesn't know what these parties stand for. I don't belong to any of those parties, but we have to be fair. I think UDA has come out with an economic blueprint. We may disagree with it, as I do. But I have to say, David Ndii and his group have come up with a blueprint. The so-called bottom-up economic blueprint is actually a classical economic blueprint in the traditional academic sense. And you can analyze it, you can disagree with it, but it is something. And they have articulated what they want to do. Now, I am a radical social revolutionary, so I don't agree with that. I believe in the transformation of the entire system. They believe in piecemeal reform strategies. That's what they believe in. Azimio does not believe in anything. Azimio just wants power. And beyond that, nobody knows what they want to do with power. Professor Nasongo is right. Uhuru does not want to retire. And he used the BBI and probably now uses Azimio as the only way to dismember the constitution so that he can extend his term beyond this election. And Kenyans must stop it. To the question, what is our view, what is my view of the NCIC's list of what's likely to spread hate in the election period? The NCIC has turned out to be moribund, inept, incompetent, and irrelevant. You cannot ban a word that exists, because words don't have meaning outside the context in which they are used. I can use madoa, which is spots, to mean spots on my clothes or spots on my field. But it's only when you use it in a way that is causing hatred or propels violence that you could say the way that that Miguna used that word would tend to do this or that which is negative. You cannot ban a word such as Tupangwingwi or Hatupangwingwi, because number one, the NCIC do not own words. It does not own words, and did not copyright or patent these words that it purports to ban. It cannot stop Kenyans from expressing themselves freely the way the Constitution allows them to express themselves. So freedom of speech is fundamental, and the NCIC cannot infringe on Kenyans' right to express themselves. They have not banned the word murder. They have not banned the word fire. They have not banned the word kill. They have not banned the word rig. They have not banned the word other words that are actually emotive, more emotive and violent. Now, the only reason the NCIC have banned some of these words is to fight William Ruto, is to join Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga's team to stop William Ruto's campaigns, because they know these words register with the people. Unfortunately for them, it seems like these people neither studied politics, they didn't study psychology, they did not study communication. They don't understand that when a regime that is unpopular says don't do this, that's what the people will do.
Okay, good
so
enough.
Right now, the moment you ban Hatupangwingwi, you're actually promoting Hatupangwingwi, and in a way, you're campaigning for William Ruto. I'm glad they are doing that, because we must defeat Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta.
Okay. Do you have a comment on that, Professor Angela?
Allow me.
Yeah.
Allow me just one comment or so, quick ones. First, I forgot to respond to what Tony Miguna mentioned earlier about my elevating of what he's calling Raila cynicism to a strategy. Now, I want to make it clear that I do not necessarily agree with what is with that in essence, but that is the reality of the situation. Now, my expectation will be, given the pedigree of Raila in the politics of Kenya, that he may use this, what Miguna is calling a cynical way, to achieve power. And perhaps once in power, he might implement the kind of agenda that is transformative enough that actually Miguna would like. I want to hold on to that. Number two, the presidency, Raila's presidency, for me, I am inclined to support the Raila presidency for one reason. Since independence, the country has been ruled at the presidential level by members of two ethnic groups. 45 years under Kikuyu presidency, 24 years under Kalenjin presidency, add 10 years of vice presidency for each. It has the politics of the country has been dominated by this. So that is what the only positive thing for me, or one of the positive things that President Uhuru is doing, is supporting Raila. If Raila wins and the presidency moves at least to another community, that I think for me would be a very positive development, politically speaking. It opens up opportunities for other communities perhaps to also enter the presidency. In my view, perhaps Ruto should also have perhaps supported someone else, right? He has fallen out with Uhuru. Uhuru is not happy with him. He is not supporting his succession to power. He should have perhaps supported Mudavadi to be the running the candidate for their formation. And then finally, a quick point on the NCIC and the words being banned. It is not necessary to ban words. The NCIC is just supposed to act on the basis of its mandate. If there is anyone who is brewing anything bad, they should just act. They have the mandate to act. You don't go around banning words that are in popular usage. You see, so that is a failure on their part as an institution. Recently, there were 2-3 politicians who said things that were unbecoming in terms of inciting others to perhaps violence. What did the NCIC do? Nothing much. So it is like a toothless bulldog. When it has all the teeth it's supposed to utilize, it's not utilizing. Turning around to ban words is shirking their own responsibility.
Okay, good. Good. We'll get to that in a moment. I'm going to bring John Maina. You've been fairly quiet for some time. Is John Maina still here?
Yes, he is.
Oh, it looks like he's frozen. We'll get him back. Dr. Miguna, there's a question there for you. But as you come on, the additional question for you, particularly for our diaspora Kenyans, what 3 specific issues do you think Kenyans in the diaspora should be concerned about as we head to the elections?
That's a good question, but let me just for a minute deal with Professor Nasongo's last statement. I don't know why I'm calling him Nabongo.
Maybe I will be a king. Maybe I will be a king soon.
Yeah,
I hope you do. Go ahead, Miguna.
But anyway, except that Kenya is not a monarchy. But on the issue of the presidency, you see, he contradicts himself. He had decried the tribal nature of politics and had said that it was not a good thing. Now he's saying it would be a good thing if Raila is president because the other presidents have been Kikuyus and Kalenjins. That's a contradiction. So
it is not a contradiction, Ms. Miguna.
It's okay. No, Wajala, give him time. Give him time. Give him time. Give him time.
I'm sorry. I
It's okay.
No, it's an inconsistency. So let me make my point.
Okay.
It should not matter in an ideal situation. It should not matter the ethnicity of a person in an ideal situation.
Yes.
Because if we are going by policy and practices, we should look, what is the ideology of this person? Do they have integrity or not? Will they be able to fulfill on the promises that they made to Kenyans? If they are able to do that, I would say that person is good for the country and should be supported. And I think we largely agree that has not been happening, and that is the major problem. I agree with him also, notwithstanding the inconsistency, that it would be a good, ideal thing if all sections and all communities are represented in the leadership, including at the presidency. But the way Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta are going about it is not the way to do it. You don't do it by fiat. You don't do it by force. You don't force people. You don't rig elections. And in any event, the last point on that issue, Uhuru wants to do Putin. What Putin did in Russia, in Kenya, which Professor Nasongo had already alluded to. It's not for Raila Odinga. He's not doing this for Raila Odinga. He's doing this so that he continues to be in power. And if you look at the Azimio party, the leader is Uhuru Kenyatta, not Raila Odinga. Raila Odinga is so-called presidential candidate, but not the leader of the so-called outfit. So in other words, Uhuru Kenyatta wants to create a vehicle that he controls, like Musalia Mudavadi says, so that he can have a remote control to switch him on and off, and we cannot accept that. Now to go to the point on the question that I think Dr. Okari asked, and please repeat it so that I can deal with it.
In your view, what are the 3 specific issues that the Kenyans in the diaspora should be concerned about as we head to the elections?
Excellent.
And as we're running out of time again.
The first point, Dr. Okari and the viewers, Kenyans should be concerned about constitutionalism and the rule of law. Without constitutionalism and the rule of law, everything else falls flat. For instance, Kenyans in the diaspora are interested in investing back in Kenya, for instance. And you want to make sure that your investments are safe. For your investments to be safe, the rule of law has to prevail, so that if there is a conflict or an issue regarding ownership of property, breach of contract, or any other thing, you can go to court, get a court order, and be able to enforce it, whether somebody is president or prime minister, a big minister, or head of the police. The police should be able to enforce all court orders, whether you agree with the state or with the government in place or not. Right now, court orders are pieces of paper. That's why I'm here. I have more than 15 court orders, and they have refused to allow me to go back to the country. So number 3, it is very important that we have integrity in public affairs, that those who assume power are people who have moral turpitude, people that you can trust, people who, if they are entrusted with public office, are not going to use it to line their pockets, are not going to grab land, are not going to plunder, are not going to mismanage, are not going to use public office for selfish gain. These are the most important things. Then, of course, all the diasporans should be allowed to vote, so that their vote counts, so that whoever comes into power, they are able to say, no, we don't support this person, or we support this person based on that. But for the vote to count right now, the diaspora should start by making sure that in this election, that these votes of theirs, no matter how many are going to vote, are not manipulated and are given to somebody they did not vote for. We have to come up with mechanisms of ensuring that we are able to protect our votes, whether they are 2, whether they are 100, or whether they are 2 million.
Okay, very good. Just a reminder again that next week we'll be having Dr. David Indi from the UDA party. He will be on the show here, and I think we'll have a chance to get the UDA perspective on these issues. To you, Professor Nasongo, 3 issues that you think Kenyans in the diaspora should be concerned about.
Very good. I have about just 2 points on that, but quickly in response to Attorney Miguna on the question of the ethnic nature of Kenyan politics, I agree with you. The ideal, you are right to say, ideally it should not matter who is president. See, ideally it shouldn't, and that is what we want to aspire to. But in reality, this is what is the case, you see. Ethnic nature of the politics, and yet whoever holds political power determines resource allocation. In the 1970s, because of the domination of the political system by President Kenyatta, so much of the development resources of the country were going specifically to Kiambu district. So much so that, in fact, members of parliament from Central Province, the other regions, rose up against that because of how skewed that is. And so it is because of the reality of the ethnicization of politics and the politicization of ethnicity that, in my view, perhaps, for example, this new constitution should have provided for a rotational presidency among the different communities until we reach a point where politics is much more institutionalized, then we allow a free-for-all. On the question of what 3 major issues should the diaspora be concerned with, I think Attorney Miguna has addressed them very effectively. All I would add is that we need to be really concerned about the integrity of the elections now. We should be concerned about that because it has many implications. If President Uhuru is so committed to ensuring Ruto does not succeed him to the extent of tampering with the electoral results, that is likely to ignite the country into chaos. And we don't want that kind of thing. So we should really be concerned about this to ensure that whoever wins, whether it is the Azimio or the, is it called One Kenya Alliance, they should be allowed to take power. So that there should be no reason for anyone to say this election has been rigged. That is one major concern. Number 2 is issues of bureaucratic and political corruption and their deleterious effects. Look at how the money that was mobilized for fighting COVID-19 was misused. That money could have transformed the health system in Kenya. but it was misused in a big way. And yet the same characters are the ones jostling for political power. And so I wish Kenyans could understand the nexus between political leadership and policy outcomes and how that actually affects them. So perhaps it's upon us to really begin to highlight these issues, engage in discourse directly with the Kenyan citizens through the media and so on, to sensitize them on the nexus between political leadership, policy outcomes, and the impact of that on their specific lives. And then finally, issues of governance, of course, and the effective distribution of national resources, both material resources and symbolic resources. It should be done in as fair a manner as possible so that every Kenyan feels they belong and therefore they have a stake in this project called Kenya. But when you look at how economic issues are even managed, right? The coffee sector, the tea sector, they are very well taken care of because they are in the region from where the power holders are. The sector of the sugar sector, the textile industry, they have collapsed. And it is because these regions have been marginalized from power for too long. And that is why, actually, Miguna is saying this presidency should move elsewhere so that others can actually really benefit from the resources of the country.
Very good. So Maina, sorry for the technical glitch there. And interesting conversation. Obviously, we'll have a lot more of this in weeks and months to come before the elections. The last word here from you, John. 3 major issues that the Kenyans in diaspora should be concerned about as we head to the elections.
First of all, let me apologize for the technical challenges we have here. As I told you, I'm not in my station. I'm on the road, but I'm glad I was able to reconnect and join my 2 panelists. I think when I went off air, Miguna was responding to one of the diaspora issues. No, actually, the issues in the Prime Minister's office. I think that's where we left off. I think he was wondering what I used to do in the Prime Minister's office. And I think, let me refresh his memory, because Miguna seems to have a selective amnesia.
Yeah, and then we went up fast. Studios are warning us we went up. Okay.
Yes, Miguna has been to my office in the Prime Minister's office, 2nd floor, and he came to my office. We were colleagues, especially when that's the time he moved to NSSIF building in Upper Hill. So he used to come and visit the Prime Minister's office, and you come to my office. So I don't know, maybe age is catching up, Mr. Miguna, my friend Mr. Miguna. But let me refresh his memory. He came to my office, and we went, both of us, went to a TV station for an interview. Okay? And I have a video of that interview. So Miguna cannot claim that he doesn't know what I was doing in the Prime Minister's office. Part of my duty.
A lot has gone on in Miguna's life, so that might be the problem.
Yes, yes, it's okay.
This guy.
It's okay.
I agree.
Your turn, John.
I agree, okay. But yeah, he's still my friend. I still respect him as a friend. We might have differences in how we approach political and governance issues, but we are still friends. Now, 3 things that would like done for the diaspora. One of them, of course, is what we are pursuing right now. Electronic registration and voting for diaspora is very key. It will answer a lot of challenges the diaspora have, because for me to come to the Prime Minister's office as an advisor for diaspora, it was to bring diaspora into to participate in national development in our country, whether it's investments or just feeling the part of this nation. The first thing diaspora were complaining about is that they were not able to register and vote from diaspora. We have tried to tackle that issue right now. We went and did a presentation in December of last year to IEBC on a platform owned by government called e-citizen, where all the diaspora renew their passports. A very user-friendly platform, and we were able to work to propose that platform to be used for registering and voting for diasporans, so that the diaspora can register from their own residence and vote from their own residence. They don't have to go fly many miles to go and register. And that's why in January of this year, we have less than 10,000 diasporans who registered for the forthcoming election. That's because of those challenges of either transport or distance. We wanted to address those issues by allowing them to register and vote on a government platform. And I can tell you that if they were allowed to register on e-citizen, we will have at least, remember we have diasporans, there are about 4 million of them. I'm sure half of them will be having 2 million Kenyans in the diaspora registered now, as compared to less than 10,000. So that's number one, and that was going to answer a lot of the other two issues. The second one is inclusion in government or in national development of our country. We have to have a government that is user-friendly to the diaspora for that to happen. I can tell you, Raila Amolo Odinga has actually worked for several years with the diaspora to make sure that they're included into the fold, whether it's through elections for them to be able to vote, or it's through opportunities in our country, because some of them, of course, want to come and invest. That is why Raila Amolo Odinga had a diaspora office in the Prime Minister's office. You can call it a diaspora desk, but it was a full-fledged diaspora office. And that's where I used to sit. Kenya, of me being an advisor for diaspora in the Prime Minister's office, we did quite a few things to promote dual citizenship and voting rights. Remember that time in 2010, we had only three countries in East Africa registering and voting for diaspora. Now, as we speak, as you saw, we have 17 countries that registered in the diaspora. Okay. Of course, if you want the list, I can read you the entire list of those 17
Just summarize as we finish up.
Yeah. So those are the kind of challenges we were trying to tackle while I was in the Prime Minister's office. Prime Minister was very supportive, and I think he's the most traveled leader in our country in the diaspora. That will be, of course, to have a process, a clear process on how they can be involved in national development, whether it's investing or opening businesses in the country.
Okay.
Those are the three biggest challenges that diaspora always tell me when we have this kind of conversations with them.
Okay, very well. I think that it's been a very interesting and long conversation. I want to thank you because we're obviously out of time, and Dr. Miguna has been sitting actually for almost close to 3 hours. So because of that, I think we'll have to come to an end to the conversation. But again, I want to thank you so very kindly for having the time to come on and most importantly giving us very interesting and very important perspectives on matters affecting the Kenyan diaspora, and more specifically in regards to what's coming up in Kenya's elections. So once more time again, I want to thank you, Dr. Miguna. Thank you so much. By the way, it's the first time I'm meeting you on air, but your contribution to the democratization process in Kenya is well noted.
My memory is still sharp, so don't buy that. John Maina.
So, John, you got that right. So Dr. Miguna says memory is very sharp. Hopefully next time it will not be a question of which office you were. Probably when you come to Minneapolis, you come to our house, we'll have Mbuzi and Mandazi, whatever that is. Or when we're in Memphis, Tennessee, or we go to Toronto, we do it together as brothers in the same place. Again, Dr. Miguna, thank you for your contribution. Thank you for the contribution to our country. We sincerely appreciate you. And hopefully the next administration should ensure that all Kenyans, including yourself, should have the freedom to go back home. I think that's very important. I think, John Maina, you hear that. As well, John, thank you so much for spending time with us here. It's late in the night, I'm sure, in Kenya on the campaign trail. Hopefully we'll have you sometime soon. Thank you for your insights. I can't thank enough my friend, Dr. Shadrach Nasongo. I realize that. Nasongo Wanjala, thank you so much. Your insights obviously have been impressive, as always. Thank you very kindly. I think the Kenyans in diaspora are so proud of you for what you all do. So for those also who have been watching, thank you so much. We've been talking to the three gentlemen regarding to the upcoming elections in Kenya. Our conversation will continue next week, but in the meantime, we encourage you to go to our Facebook page. That's KDL TV News. Facebook, please subscribe. We need you there. On YouTube as well, if you could get to us on our Twitter page, we'd love to hear your comments so that we can encompass those as we continue this conversation up to the elections in August. Again, a quick reminder, next week, Dr. David Ndii from the UDA will be here to discuss the UDA's perspectives on the upcoming elections in Kenya. And again, the key point for all Kenyans in the diaspora and those ones in Kenya is just a reminder that politics is emotive. Yes, we're going to have differences of opinion. They're going to have different emotions, just as we've seen on the show here. But again, it's important to agree so that we can move our country forward. So again, those ones in Kenya, we encourage you to get into the campaign trails, be respectful of one another, focus on issues. Let's please not focus on personalities. Because we as a nation, if we're going to be competitive on the global stage, then we really must up our politics, we must focus on issues, and then as we elect who is going to be the next president and who is going to take key positions in the administration, it's important we have leaders who are visionary, and I think that's what's important for us. Again, on behalf of our team here at our KDL TV studio headquarters here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, my colleague here, Ben Kibwato, many thanks to you as we continue this conversation, Kenya Votes 2022. Thank you. I'm Dr. Jeremiah Okari. Goodbye. 40,000 Kenyans who live across the world. Again, so happy and very delighted to have our panelists here on screen. If you don't mind, again, as I said earlier on, John Maina from the Center of Diaspora Affairs will join us momentarily, but for the sake of our viewers, I'm sure Dr. Miguna, most of you know you, but for the sake of our viewers who might not have met you before, a quick introduction of who you are.
I'm a Kenyan in exile.
So that's Dr. Miguna, a friend of ours and a friend of the show, Kenyan in exile from Canada. Also, Professor Nasongo.
Hi viewers, this is Professor Wanjala Nasongo, Professor of International Relations and Comparative Politics at Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee. Nice to be with you this evening, this afternoon.
Oh, thank you, gentlemen. Nice to have you. And myself here, Dr. Jeremiah Okari from our studios headquarters here in Minneapolis. And also delighted to have also John Maina joining us live from Nairobi. John, we're just starting the program. If you could please introduce yourself to our diaspora audience.
Good evening. If you're in Africa, if you're in Europe, good morning. If you're in America, good morning. I'm sorry, we were on the road, so I had to look for a station to stop and log in. I'm sorry, I'm not in my station. So you can understand it's a silly season. We are on a campaign trail. But I said I have to jump on board. And I'm glad to see my old colleague, Miguna, friend and colleague. And let me say thank you so much for having me here.
So good to have you, gentlemen, and again, for our viewers, if you have any questions and you want to be involved in this discussion, please feel free to go to our Facebook page and feel free to make your comment. And if you have any question, please do so as well on our Facebook page or YouTube. We'll be able to bring in a few questions later in the show. But in the meantime, also a quick reminder that it's all about politics. And as I said in our earlier program, politics is emotive. So you expect sometimes the emotions to be high, low, middle, and that's an expectation of politics, as John Maina just told us a moment ago, is doing that in the campaign trail. So as we exchange ideas, we're hoping that we're going to help inform Kenyans so that they make a better decision as we head to elections in Kenya. So, gentlemen, maybe to begin off, let's begin from the ground. John Maina, if you don't mind, very quickly, what's going on in the ground and what are Kenyans missing, especially the Kenyans in the diaspora?
Well, I know Kenyans can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, good. Kenyans in the diaspora actually were looking forward to participate in the oncoming 2020 general elections in Kenya, but unfortunately, IEBC was not able to register all the diasporans who were willing to vote. The diaspora voters, I think, who registered were less than 5,000, I think, worldwide. And that's because the requirement was that you go to an embassy, about 12 embassies in the world, to register there as a voter. And some of those embassies, it was a challenge for them to get there.
Okay.
I know Miguna can tell you that because Miguna is in Canada. Okay. I think Canada, they had 3 polling stations, registering stations.
So quickly, John, so what is the political environment in Kenya? So, okay, quickly in a sentence, yes?
Well, as Obama used to say, we're in the silly season. Okay. It's quite a silly season right now. Everything goes.
Okay, good. At least we'll have enough time to talk about all that. So I'm going to bring in, if you don't mind, Dr. Minguna, just like any Kenyan living in the diaspora, and for you in particular, talking about you being in exile, what has been your assessment, a very brief assessment of the political environment in Kenya?
Toxic, extremely toxic, extremely disappointing. Political space has contracted, not expanded. The democratic rights have been mainly compromised. The Constitution promised a robust Bill of Rights, and the Kenyans have not realized that. So even though you find that different political outfits are excited about the election, the reality is that more than 10 years after the ratification of the new constitution, Kenyans are worse off economically, worse off in terms of their rights being respected. So we are going into this election, a very divided country with a toxic environment, a bad concoction. We hope things will turn out okay, but I don't have a very good impression of what is going to happen.
Okay, thank you for that quick intro. Again, we're talking about politics 64 years into independence. Professor Nasongo, maybe your views first. Just, I'm sure every Kenyan across the world have their opinions, the negative, the toxic.